Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
The boardroom smelled like old leather and older money. Anderson and Sons had occupied the same downtown office building for 43 years, and everything about it screamed legacy. Mahogany paneling, oil paintings of past partners, a conference table that had witnessed 1,000 deals. I sat at that table across from my father, trying to keep my face neutral as he delivered the news I'd seen coming for weeks. "We've made our decision about the junior partnership position," Dad said, his fingers steepled in that way that meant the decision was final. "The board agrees, we're offering it to your sister." I said nothing. Around the table, 5 senior partners avoided my eyes. "Victoria has shown exceptional dedication to Anderson and Sons," Dad continued as if reading from prepared remarks. "She's brought in significant clients. She understands the culture. She's committed to the family legacy." The unspoken part hung in the air, "And you're not." "I understand," I said quietly. Uncle Raymond shifted uncomfortably. "Melissa, you're a talented attorney. This isn't a reflection on your abilities." "It's fine," I interrupted gently. "Really?" Dad's expression softened slightly. "You can still practice here, of course. We value your work. But the partnership track requires a certain presence. Your sister has that presence." What he meant was, Victoria looked the part. He talked the part. She played golf with clients and laughed at their jokes and remembered their wives' names. She was everything a partner at Anderson and Sons should be. I was the one who stayed late reviewing contracts, who found the loopholes that saved clients millions, who built airtight cases while Victoria took the credit in court. "When does she start?" I asked. "Officially, next month. We'll make the announcement at the partners' dinner." Dad stood, signaling the meeting was over. "I hope you'll be there to support your sister." "Of course," I lied. I gathered my briefcase and left the boardroom. Victoria was waiting by the elevators, practically vibrating with suppressed excitement. "Did they tell you?" she asked. "Congratulations." She grabbed my arm. "Mel, I know this is weird. But you understand, right? I've wanted this my whole life. And you've always been more interested in the technical side anyway." "Sure," I said, pressing the elevator button. "You're not mad." The elevator arrived. I stepped inside. "I'm not mad, Vic. You earned it." Her smile was radiant with relief. "Thank you. That means everything." The doors closed on her glowing face, and I allowed myself one moment of pure fury before my expression settled back into neutrality. They had no idea what they'd just done. The Anderson family had built their law firm on corporate litigation. Dad was the 3rd generation to practice there, following his father and grandfather. The expectation had always been simple. Both daughters would join the firm, work their way up and eventually take over. Victoria had embraced that path from day one. She went to Dad's alma mater. She joined the same legal fraternity. She interned at Anderson and Sons every summer during law school. I'd done none of those things. I'd gone to a different school, studied different specializations, spent my summers at the ACLU and public defender's office, much to Dad's disappointment. "That's not the Anderson way," he'd said more than once. But I'd still come to work at the firm after graduation. Still put in the hours. Still won cases. I'd thought that would be enough. It wasn't. Because Victoria was the golden child. The one who networked effortlessly, who charmed clients over drinks, who looked perfect in the firm's marketing materials. I was the workhorse they kept in the back office. After that boardroom meeting, I gave myself 24 hours to be angry. Then I got strategic. I'd been saving money since my first year at the firm. Living modestly. Investing carefully. I had $340,000 in accessible capital and a credit line for another $200,000 if I needed it. I also had information. Working in the background gave me access to things Victoria never saw. I reviewed every major contract. I knew which clients were struggling. I knew the firm's actual financials versus what they told the partners. And I knew Anderson and Sons was vulnerable. Dad was old school. He'd built the firm on relationships and reputation, but he'd ignored the changing market. Younger firms were aggressive, tech-savvy, hungry. Anderson and Sons was losing ground. The firm's value was dropping. They just didn't know it yet. 3 months after Victoria's promotion, I approached Uncle Raymond privately. Not as his niece, as an investor. The firm needs capital, I said over coffee. We'd met at a place downtown away from the office. I know the Harrison acquisition fell through. I know you're struggling with the new litigation insurance premiums. Raymond's face tightened. That's confidential firm business, Melissa. I review the books, Uncle Ray. I know everything. I slid a folder across the table. I'm prepared to invest $500,000 in exchange for equity. He opened the folder. His eyes widened. 60%? The firm is worth less than you think. My offer is generous. Your father would never agree to this. My father doesn't need to know. Not yet. I leaned forward. You can structure it through a shell company. Anonymous investor. The capital keeps the firm solvent while you rebuild. In 5 years, when Dad retires, you reveal the investor's identity. And if he refuses? Then Anderson and Sons continues bleeding money until you're forced to sell anyway. At least this way it stays in the family. Raymond studied me for a long moment. You're doing this because of Victoria. I'm doing this because it's a smart investment. What happened with Victoria just showed me where I actually stand. I'd rather own the firm than work for it. He took the folder. I'll need to discuss this with the other partners. Quietly. Of course. Took 6 weeks. The partners were desperate enough to overlook the unusual terms. They structured the deal through a limited liability corporation called Apex Holdings. Anonymous investor. Clean paperwork. Dad never even knew about the vote. I owned 60% of Anderson and Sons before Victoria's name went on the door. For 5 years I played my role perfectly. I stayed at the firm as a senior associate, never pushing for partnership, never making waves. I did exceptional work and let Victoria take credit when it mattered. At family dinners, I listened to Dad brag about Victoria's latest victory while I stayed quiet. Your sister's bringing in 7-figure clients now, Dad would say proudly. Following in my footsteps. That's wonderful, I'd reply. Victoria was genuinely good at her job. I had to give her that. She'd earned her success through hard work and talent. But she'd also had every advantage. Dad's connections, the partnership track, the firm's full support. Meanwhile, I built my anonymous empire. Through Apex Holdings, I approved every major decision. When the firm wanted to expand to a second office, I signed off. When they needed to upgrade their case management software, I approved the budget. When they considered taking on a risky class action suit, I reviewed the numbers and gave the green light. The firm thrived. Revenue increased 40% over 5 years. They attracted top talent. They won major cases. Dad attributed it all to Victoria's leadership as the new junior partner and eventually vice president. I never corrected him. Uncle Raymond and I met quarterly to review the books. He was the only one who knew the truth, and the guilt ate at him. This isn't right, Melissa, he said at one of our meetings. You've saved this firm. You should get credit. I'm getting something better than credit, I replied. I'm getting ownership. But your father will retire in 18 months. That's when we reveal everything. He'll be devastated. He should have thought about that before giving my partnership to Victoria. Raymond shook his head. I hope you know what you're doing. I did. Dad's retirement dinner was scheduled for the first Saturday in November at the River Club. 200 guests. The firm's entire history on display. Dad had been planning it for months, treating it like a coronation, because in his mind that's what it was. Victoria would be announced as the new managing partner. Dad's legacy would continue. The Anderson name would endure for another generation. I RSVP'd with a +1. My attorney, David Chin. You're sure about this? David asked as we drove to the venue. Once we activate those voting shares, there's no going back. I'm sure. Your family will implode. My family imploded 5 years ago when they chose Victoria over me. They just didn't notice. The River Club was elegant, all soft lighting and river views. Guests mingled with champagne glasses, celebrating Dad's 40-year career. I saw opposing counsel, judges, former clients. The entire legal community had turned out. Victoria found me near the bar. She looked stunning in a navy dress, her hair perfectly styled. Mel, you made it. Wouldn't miss it. This is insane, right? 200 people. She grabbed my hand. I'm so nervous about the speech. What if I mess up? You'll be fine. You always are. He hugged me. Thank you for being here. I know it's been hard watching me get all the attention, but you're still my sister. That matters more than anything. I hugged her back. It does. She had no idea what was coming. Dinner was served at 8. I sat at the family table with Victoria, Dad, Mom, and Uncle Raymond. Raymond looked like he might be sick. He knew what I'd planned. Dad stood to give his speech around 9:30. He was eloquent, funny, moving. He talked about building the firm, about tradition, about legacy. Then he gestured to Victoria. And now, I'm thrilled to announce that my daughter Victoria will be stepping into the role of managing partner. The firm couldn't be in better hands. The room erupted in applause. Victoria stood, beaming, and moved to the podium. Dad handed her a small gift box, the key to his office, I realized. Thank you all for coming, Victoria began, her voice steady despite her nerves. When I joined Anderson & Sons 8 years ago, I never imagined I'd be standing here tonight. My father built something extraordinary, and I'm honored to continue that legacy. She talked about the firm's values, about their commitment to clients, about the future she envisioned. I pulled out my phone and texted David. Now. He nodded and made a call. Victoria continued her speech. I want to thank the partners who believed in me, Uncle Raymond who mentored me, the associates who worked tirelessly, and my sister Melissa, who's been my biggest supporter even when I didn't deserve it. People turned to smile at me. I raised my glass slightly. So here's to the next chapter of Anderson & Sons. Uncle Raymond's phone buzzed. Then another partner's phone. Then another. Victoria paused, confused as half the room started checking their devices. Dad pulled out his phone and frowned. His face went pale. The champagne glass in his hand slipped, shattering on the floor. The room fell silent. Richard. Mom touched his arm. What's wrong? Dad stared at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. Then he looked at Uncle Raymond. Tell me this is wrong. Raymond closed his eyes. I can't. Tell me what is wrong, Victoria demanded. Dad's voice came out strangled. There's an email from our corporate registry. Apex Holdings has activated voting rights. They're calling an emergency board meeting. Who's Apex Holdings? Victoria asked. Our majority investor. Dad's hands were shaking. They've been anonymous for 5 years. They own 60% of the firm. The room erupted in whispers. Lawyers immediately understood the implications. Someone with 60% equity controlled everything. Every decision, every policy, every leadership position. That's impossible, Victoria said. I would have known. You didn't need to know, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood smoothing my dress. Apex Holdings is my company. I've owned 60% of Anderson & Sons for 5 years. The silence was absolute. Victoria's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, horror. You, she whispered. Me. Dad found his voice. This is insane. Melissa, what have you done? I invested in a struggling firm when no one else would. I provided the capital that kept you afloat. I approved every major decision that led to your 40% revenue increase. I met his eyes. I saved Anderson & Sons. You just didn't know it was me. But why? Mom asked, genuinely confused. Why hide it? Because 5 years ago, I was told I wasn't committed enough to the family business. That I didn't have the right presence. That my sister was the better choice for partnership. I kept my voice level, professional. So I decided to own the business instead. Uncle Raymond stood. For the record, I've been trying to get her to reveal this for years. She insisted on waiting until tonight. You knew. Dad turned on him. You've known this entire time? Someone had to save the firm, Richard. You were too proud to see how close we were to bankruptcy. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her hand. Everything I've built, my partnership, my position, you could take it all away. I agreed. I have controlling interest. I can restructure the entire firm if I want. Then why haven't you? She demanded, and now there were tears. Why let me think I'd earned this? Because you did earn it, Vic. Every promotion, every client, every case. That was you. I never interfered with your career. I just made sure the firm was stable enough for you to build one. Dad slammed his hand on the table. This is unforgivable. You've been lying to us for 5 years. I've been investing in us for 5 years, I corrected. There's a difference. And I never lied, I just didn't volunteer information you never asked for. What do you want? Victoria's voice was sharp now, cutting through her shock. You didn't reveal this tonight just to make a point. What do you want? I looked at her, then at Dad, then at the 200 guests watching this family drama unfold. I want what was always mine, I said simply. A seat at the table. Not as someone's daughter or someone's sister. As an equal partner in the firm I saved. David stepped forward, handing documents to Dad and Uncle Raymond. These are proposals for restructuring Anderson and Sons partnership agreement. Ms. Anderson retains majority equity but offers equitable profit sharing among all partners based on merit and contribution. You're taking over the firm, Dad said flatly. I already own the firm, I corrected. I'm just deciding what to do with it. Victoria's face was streaked with tears now. I can't believe you did this. Tonight of all nights. At Dad's retirement dinner. Would you have preferred I did it quietly? Like you keep believing the firm was yours? Or should I have told you 5 years ago and watched you crumble under the knowledge that your baby sister owned everything you were building? She had no answer for that. Dad's voice was cold. What happens now? Now. We have an emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. I'll formally introduce myself as majority shareholder. We'll discuss the restructuring proposal. And we'll decide together what the future of Anderson and Sons looks like. Together, Dad repeated bitterly. With you holding 60% of the vote. Yes. He stood, and for a moment I thought he might walk out. Instead he stepped close and lowered his voice so only our family table could hear. I have spent 40 years building this firm. 40 years of sacrifice and dedication. And you've undermined all of it because I hurt your feelings 5 years ago? I met his eyes without flinching. You didn't hurt my feelings, Dad. You showed me exactly where I stood in this family. I'm just the one who did something about it. Mom touched my arm. Melissa, please. There has to be another way. There was another way. It was called giving me the partnership I earned. You chose differently. I picked up my purse. David fell into step beside me as I headed for the exit. Behind me I heard Victoria's voice crack. Mel, wait. I didn't wait. The story made the legal community gossip circuit within hours. By Monday morning it was in the business section. Anderson and Sons reveals secret majority shareholder, founder's daughter. The emergency board meeting was tense. All 12 partners attended along with their attorneys. I arrived with David and a litigation team I'd retained specifically for this moment. Dad didn't look at me. Victoria's eyes were swollen from crying. Uncle Raymond called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the restructuring proposal submitted by Apex Holdings, represented by Melissa Anderson. I stood. Gentlemen. Ladies. 5 years ago this firm was hemorrhaging money. The Harrison acquisition fell through. Insurance premiums were skyrocketing. 2 major clients were considering leaving. You needed capital and I provided it. Under false pretenses, one of the senior partners interrupted. Under anonymous investment terms that you all approved, I corrected. I've broken no laws and violated no agreements. I simply chose not to reveal my identity until now. Why now? Another partner asked. I glanced at Victoria. Because it was time. The meeting lasted 4 hours. We reviewed the restructuring proposal line by line. It was fair, I'd made sure of that. I retained controlling interest but established profit sharing based on actual contribution, not seniority or family name. I created clear partnership tracks with objective criteria. I proposed expanding the firm's practice areas to include more public interest work. Everything I'd wanted to build from the beginning. And leadership? Dad asked finally. That's up to the partners. I'm not interested in day-to-day management. I want a seat on the board with appropriate voting rights. Beyond that, the managing partner should be whoever the firm chooses. Victoria's head snapped up. You're not taking my position? I never wanted your position, Vic. I wanted recognition that I belonged here. That I'd earned it. I looked directly at her. You're a good managing partner. I'm not going to remove you out of spite. Then what do you want? She asked again, desperate now. I want you to understand what you have. I want Dad to understand what he built wasn't destroyed by my investment. It was saved by it. And I want everyone in this room to understand that competence doesn't always look the way you expect it to. The restructuring passed. 9 votes in favor, 3 abstaining. Dad was one of the abstentions. The weeks that followed were brutal. The family fractured. Dad stopped speaking to me entirely. Mom tried to mediate and ended up angry with everyone. Victoria alternated between fury and tears. The firm itself stabilized. The restructuring was actually good for morale. Younger associates appreciated the clear partnership criteria. Several senior partners who'd been coasting on legacy retired. We hired fresh talent. Revenue continued to climb. But family dinners became minefields. The first one I attended after the revelation, Dad left when I arrived. Give him time, Mom said weakly. How much time? I asked. 5 more years. 10. How long until he realizes I saved his legacy instead of destroying it? She had no answer. Victoria and I met for coffee 6 weeks after the board meeting. She looked tired, older somehow. I've been thinking, she said, stirring sugar into her latte mechanically. About what you said at the retirement dinner. About earning everything. I waited. You were right. I did earn my position. But I earned it with every advantage handed to me. Dad's name. His connections. The partnership track. While you were working twice as hard for half the recognition. Vic. Let me finish. She looked up and her eyes were clear. I was so focused on being the golden child that I never noticed they were treating you like you didn't matter. And I never stood up for you. Not once. You didn't know. I should have known. You're my sister. I should have asked why you weren't getting the same opportunities. I should have pushed Dad to give you the partnership too instead of just accepting that it was mine. I felt something loosen in my chest. Thank you for saying that. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. But I want you to know I see it now. What they did. What I benefited from. Do you hate me for the takeover? She considered that. I did. At first. But honestly, it's kind of brilliant. Terrifying and manipulative and ruthless. But brilliant. I almost smiled. That's the nicest thing you've said to me in years. I'm serious. You saw a problem, you solved it, and you did it so quietly that no one knew until it was too late to stop you. She shook her head. That takes serious strategic thinking. I learned from the best. I watched you network and charm and position yourself for 5 years. I just did it differently. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked for the first time since we were kids. About the firm, about family, about the impossible standards we'd both been trying to meet. At the end, Victoria asked, "What happens now? With us?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'd like to figure it out. If you're willing." "I'm willing." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a start. Dad took longer. 3 months after the revelation, Uncle Raymond finally cornered him. "Richard, you need to talk to your daughter." "I have nothing to say to her." "Then listen. Because she's the reason Anderson and Sons still exists." Raymond showed him the real numbers from 5 years ago. The actual financial projections. The bankruptcy timeline they'd been facing. "Melissa saved us," Raymond said bluntly. "She invested when no one else would. She asked for majority equity because the firm was worth so little at that point. And then she spent 5 years building it back up without taking a dime in distributions." Dad stared at the spreadsheets. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you were too proud to admit we were failing. And Melissa knew you'd refuse her help if she asked openly. So she went behind my back. She saved your legacy while you were too busy celebrating Victoria to notice." The words hung between them. Finally, Dad called me. "Can we meet?" We met at his office. His old office, which was now a conference room. Neutral territory. "I've reviewed the financials," he said without preamble. "From 5 years ago." "Okay. We were in worse shape than I realized." "Yes. You saved the firm. I invested in it. The partners saved it by doing good work." He looked at me properly for the first time in months. "Why didn't you tell me you wanted the partnership that badly? Would it have changed anything?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said finally. "Victoria seemed like the natural choice. He fit. You were always different. Different doesn't mean less capable." I know that now. He rubbed his face. I just wish you'd found another way. There was no other way, Dad. You gave me two choices. Accept being invisible or take control. I chose control. By ambushing us at my retirement dinner. By making sure you couldn't ignore me anymore. We sat in silence for a long moment. I'm proud of what you built, Dad said quietly. I should have said that years ago. You're brilliant, Melissa. More brilliant than I gave you credit for. The words should have felt like victory. Instead they just felt sad. Thank you, I said. Can we find our way back from this? I thought about that. About 40 years of being invisible. About watching Victoria get everything while I got crumbs. About the moment I decided to stop asking for a seat at the table and just buy the whole damn table instead. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm willing to try. If you are. He nodded. I am. It wasn't reconciliation. But like with Victoria, it was a start. 1 year after the revelation, Anderson and Sons held its annual partners' dinner. This time I sat at the head table, not as someone's daughter but as majority shareholder and board member. Victoria gave the keynote address. She'd grown into the managing partner role, making bold decisions and leading the firm through a successful expansion into intellectual property law. This year we've grown 35%, she announced. We've won landmark cases. We've attracted top talent. And we've done it by embracing change instead of fearing it. She looked directly at me. Someone very wise once told me that competence doesn't always look the way you expect it to. This firm is proof of that. The room applauded. Later at the bar, Dad approached me. Your mother and I would like you to come to Sunday dinner. If you're willing. I'm willing. Victoria mentioned you're looking at acquiring a smaller firm in the Research Triangle? Considering it. The numbers are good. I'd like to review the proposal. If you're open to my input. I studied him. His pride had taken a beating, but he was here. Trying. I'd appreciate that, I said. He nodded, relieved. Good. That's good. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, two people who shared DNA in a law firm but were still figuring out how to be family. I really am proud of you, Dad said. I know I failed to show it. But I am. I know. Do you forgive me? I considered that. Forgiveness was complicated. He'd hurt me. He'd chosen Victoria over me repeatedly. He'd made me feel invisible in my own family. But he was trying now. And maybe that was enough. I'm working on it, I said honestly. He nodded. That's fair. My tiny apartment is still tiny, though I've added a home office for the increasing amount of board work I do. I've invested in 3 other firms now using the same strategy. Find promising companies that need capital, provide it anonymously, build equity. I'm building an empire. Quietly. Strategically. Just like I always have. Victoria calls me once a week. We've rebuilt something that resembles a sisterhood. She asks my advice on firm decisions. I ask about her cases. We're learning to be equals instead of competitors. Dad and I have Sunday dinners most months. Mom mediates when things get tense. We're finding our way. It's not perfect, but it's real. And when people ask what I do, I tell them the truth. I'm a partner at Anderson and Sons. And I own a few other things too. The surprise on their faces never gets old. Because success doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it builds in silence, in strategy, in the spaces between other people's assumptions and your actual capabilities. I learned to be okay with that. More than okay. I learned to weaponize it. And now when I sit at the head of the table at Anderson and Sons, no one questions whether I belong there. They know exactly who owns the room.